Okay. I'd like to welcome everyone. I kind of put on the agenda that at 5, if anyone wanted to talk about the great backyard bird count, we could. One person came, whoever out there is named Owner. I tried to talk to you, but I think your TV was too loud. So, like, if you were trying to reach me, I apologize for that. But Audubon did have the great backyard bird count. Actually, it ended today. Here's one of our students. I saw some mourning doves and just going around, even though it's winter, here are some of the birds that we were able to see at some of the great backyard birding events that we had done. So, even in winter, a beautiful, beautiful area. Oh, and I see a chat. Oh, 30 plus eagles. Wow. Thanks, James. So here's just some great birds here. And before I link these birds, oh, and I'm sorry, these are the larks. Lark, if you're out there listening. So here are the horned larks we saw yesterday. They fly in little groups and nice little like mustachy area there. Um, and so, as always, if you wanted to go out, there are just so many great groups in our area, from Orange County Audubon Society to the BKA and the Bashkill Area Association, the Mamakating Environmental Education Center. Sullivan County has an Audubon Society. The Edgar Mearns Club is a great birding group. There are the Friends of the Shawangunk Grasslands. There are the Friends of the Wallkill River. I was out yesterday with the Gifford Pinchot Audubon Society on a bird walk, and so just it's just wonderful. We have such a diverse area, and we have such a great set of environmental organizations. So I really encourage you to look up any of those and see if oh, where do they announce walks? So yeah, actually, so I apologize. I'm wondering whether we could have, like a powwow, all of these groups, and come up with a communal calendar. That's actually on my mind. That's a great question. I think the only thing you could do is go to each of these organizations, their websites. That's why I kind of put the pictures there. It would be great if there was one big calendar that all environmental people could go to. And actually, I've thought of that. So maybe that comes to fruition someday, but we're not quite there yet. But that's a great idea. Unless you wanted to help put it together, in which case, feel free to email me. That would be great. Um, so just all of these great groups. And I wanted today to talk about insects. And I, when I usually talk about it, most of the talk is just how wonderful insects are. And I'd like to do that. And sometimes at the end, you go to the bad news. I just kind of think the bad news helps you appreciate the insects more. So I'd like to kind of like start with that, if that's okay. And looking at like the birds, just what I did this weekend is, the National Audubon's great backyard bird count. They really push, hey everyone, let's go look at the birds, let's count the birds. And one of the reason, is among just we want to market them, but the climate is changing. Their numbers are dropping. North America has lost a quarter of its birds in just a couple of decades. Let's count them, let's measure it because they're important. That actually applies to insects even more. Insects are dropping even faster. In fact, the term that is being used more and more is insect apocalypse. All right, that are just like it's devastating the loss we're seeing. Some people call it the second silent spring. Now, I'm old enough to kind of get the reference. I'm not sure that everyone is, but Rachel Carson wrote the book when DDT was being used, Silent Spring, just really making the public aware of the effects of pesticides. Well, I'll get into this in a second. You could argue that we're seeing that again. It's just no one's really raised the alarm to that level. So I'd like to kind of talk about that. And if you were of the mind, and I would get it, where you'd say, you know what, maybe not my thing as much. I like birds. I get it. Oh, no, sure. All right, so everyone to Lark's house then. We'll see Asian lady beetles there. Um, if you're of the mind like, oh, well, I prefer the bird talks and why the birds are declining. Well, the birds eat the bugs. So just, even if bugs aren't your primary interest, as I'll get into, if you're into birds, well, I mean, the warblers, they are insect eaters. If the population of their food is dropping, then that's going to affect them. If you say, I like to fish, I love bald eagles. Well, big fish eat little fish. And guess what little fish are eating? They're eating the water bugs. And so if you say, oh, well, doesn't really affect me as much, I'd like to go home and eat some fruit or whatever. Well, the fruit that you're eating pollinated by these insects. And so insects are so fundamental and just let me just go to the big numbers. I'm sorry, I've got like so many videos, I think. Where did I put it? There's like 100 videos I can choose from. Biomass, where did I do biomass? Oh, there we go. Just to kind of show you how big we're talking about before we get to the bad news. If you were to weigh animals, all right, let's put them on a scale, the animals of planet Earth. Wild birds weigh that much, wild mammals weigh that much, nematodes weigh that much, humans weigh this much, livestock. So just, I'm always struck by livestock outweigh all wild mammals and birds. So that's crazy. There are a lot of worms, there are a lot of corals. But then if you keep on going, we got mollusks up there, but we'd have to do this before we got all of the arthropods, most of them insects. So if you're talking about life on Earth, if you're not talking about insects, you're missing most of it. All right. If you're talking about species, not just the weight of it, if you're talking about species, some of you already know this because this was the song that we came in on. I have a song here. I won't make you listen to it again. It's the beetle, moth, wasp, and fly song. Why? Because over half of all species on Earth belong to these four groups of insects. So if you were to list the number of beetles, moths, flies, and wasps, that outnumbers all other species of life on Earth, including plants, fungi, all of the other animals. So insects are just enormously successful. And if they start going way down, then that's worrisome. Last thing before we get into why they're going down. Let's say you're not even interested in all of that. You're like, I'm kind of into people. Well, Audubon makes this point really well when they say, like, we're worried about the birds, we're worried about the water for the birds, because a habitat that isn't good for birds isn't that good for people either. And if you're asking questions, is it like the climate changing? Is it the pesticides? Is it lead? Is it this? Is it that? If that's affecting the bald eagles who are eating the fish, we're also eating the fish. All right. And so, however you're approaching it, this is something to put on our radar and to watch. So, insect apocalypse, why might this be occurring? Well, there's maybe four or five big reasons. One is habitat loss. I'm old, I'm not crazy old. But when I was born, there were 3.5 billion people on the planet. There are now 8.2. All right. So just my little lifetime has more than doubled the population on Earth, like added 5 billion people. All right. Earth had never had a billion people on it before 1820. All right. It's now up to 8. That's just 200 years later. So all of this for almost all of, history, like going back, hundreds of thousands of human years, this was all wild space. It isn't anymore. All right. So humans have transformed the landscape. This is something new. The birds are dealing with it, but so are the bugs. Where do they go? So we've changed the habitats. The forests are going. It used to be that most of the forests were being lost from temperate areas. That is now changing. Most modern deforestation is occurring in tropical areas. So I'm going to go on because I don't know how many people care about tropical bugs. And I mean that because I lived in Paraguay for 2 years and I was in my site. I'm like, start collecting insects, do a little study, and I'll go to my friend who's in the Biodiversity Museum in the capital. And I took some of the samples and he looked at it, he was like, this is amazing, all the bugs you got. You probably got some new species here. And I said, well, that's awesome. Let's go like classify new species and stuff. And he said, yeah, but no one could tell us that. He says there's one guy in the Smithsonian, he doesn't answer my calls, and there's one guy in Buenos Aires, but he's got a year backlog. And so I said, all right, just take it. I just left them. And I think they got thrown away. Like there were new species, but there's just so many bugs in Brazil, in these tropical forests. No one knows they're there. There's no field guide for the bugs of Brazil. All right, because there's just so many species. And so here we are in Paraguay. That used to be jungle. All right. Just like here outside, every other tree used to be this wide. So when you look at the Earth's surface, it has been transformed by humankind. And just think of the animals that used to live there. So if we were to look at tropical forests, all right, clearly now it's not the temperate forests in dark green where most of the loss is occurring. It's the tropical ones in Zaire and Brazil and Indonesia, et cetera. All right. So the net loss is about since during the 1980s was about half the size of India. We've lost a third of our forest. We've lost 2/3 of our wild grassland. All right, so what now is like, the cropland, et cetera, that used to be grassland. So habitat loss is one of the main things. And that affects everybody, but there are some bugs that only occur in these little areas. Like these are bugs from the Galapagos. Nowhere else in the world do you find these insects. So you don't have to have a habitat loss of a huge area to lose um, these bugs. One of the things we often recognize, there's so many endangered species. And if we were to go back to the songs, I got, songs like the habitat loss song that should like this frog only lives in Colombia, nowhere else in this world. This snake only lives here. We could just give example after example. All right. So there lives there in Madagascar, nowhere else. And I'll just play this. All of these things, if so, you lose that habitat, the species is gone. That's the only place on Earth where it occurs. I'd like to show you the bug thing, but no one studies the bugs that well. We don't know what bugs only live in this little piece of Zaire. We have no idea. A lot of them are just disappearing before we even knew that they were there. So habitat loss is dangerous, especially for those who are really specialized to one part of the world. So the habitat is being lost, but a lot of it is still there. Oh, but then second problem, some of it is changing. All right. So with climate change, the habitat which is still remaining, the temperature is different. The rainfall is different. The extremities of the extreme storm. So all of a sudden you get like bigger storms and bigger floods. All right. So that might flood the area, standing water. Well, a lot of insects have their eggs there. All right. And if all of a sudden now it's flooded for a while, like you think in spring, okay, well, the water's gone, but it might have then killed the insects um, uh, uh, during a specific time of their life cycle. The climate changing is a major thing. So this was 2 years ago, February. I was skiing. February, everything should be white. So the woods are obviously not covered in snow, and the snow that they had blown on the ski hills was melting to the point where they had to close some of the hills. This is Big Bear, just I think like 25 minutes from here. And I do that because that could be called a false spring. Birds and bugs are having problem with that. Like all of a sudden, February, March gets a little warmer, and that triggers these things. Oh, I'll hatch from my egg. Maybe I'll start to migrate. But we haven't hit spring yet, and then we go in another cold snap. I think this is 4 years ago. We were watching Eagle's Nest on the Bashakil, and there were some eggs laid. There were adults on it, and then nothing. And what do we think it was? Is they laid their eggs too early, and there was a cold snap, and the eggs froze. And so just all of these things are, the insects are under stress because their habitat's disappearing. The habitat which is still there is being changed. And just one last thing before I go to the next one. There's timing issues. All right. So if you're in nature, a lot of times you're just barely making it. Like if you're migrating, I mean, like the yellow legs birds, some of them are coming from Tierra del Fuego. If you see a greater yellow legs in Orange County in spring, it might have flown all the way from Tierra del Fuego. I mean, that's incredible. But if you're going to do that, you better be right on your timing. Like you expect to be able to feed along these spots. You can't get that wrong. So here's just the thing. Wallenpaupack is a huge lake about an hour from here. And a lot of insects only live a couple days before they die. Like they spend most of their lives as young. And then when they become the adult flying form, a lot of them don't even have mouths. They don't feed. They're just going to mate and die. That's their job. And then you just have a gazillion dead bugs on the water. That they did their job. They made it and they died. So these gulls, they're trying to hit that. They're migrating. And they're like, I know there is going to be nothing but bugs floating on this water. And I want that to be where I feed it. Okay, I'll go back. All right, so here's a gull. Just look at all those dead bugs. So it's timed it right. This is going to now have the energy for the next leg of its migration. But as the climate changes, the leaves are bursting out the plants are bursting out their leaves a little bit differently. The bugs want to catch the leaves right when they start to come out before the plant has a chance to put toxins in them. The birds, the warblers, are trying to catch the bugs right when they come out on their migration. So if timing is important and then the climate changes, like everybody's all out of sync. All right. And then just, here's other examples of climate change. The past 2 summers, last summer was bad. 2 summers ago was much worse. This should be a wetland. It was just mud. All right. So there's all of these aquatic insects. All right. So they're obviously being affected. So there is still habitat, but it's changing. So if it warms, here's just a diagram. Let's imagine all of these species live in this area here, and they live at this altitude on the mountain. So these guys are here, these guys are halfway up the mountain, et cetera. As it warms, what we're seeing is animals moving farther north and then farther up the mountain. But obviously, that's a problem once you get to the top because there's nowhere else you can go. All right. So you can move farther north up to a point, you can go up the range. So we know it's affecting other animals that we can see. We're not really watching the bugs, but it's certainly affecting them as well. Just looking at the chat. And oh, we care. Great. Thank you. I appreciate that. Thank you. That's why we invited you. Thank you. You're making us feel better. But then it gets worse. Then you have the invasive species. And once again, I hate the invasive species because of just how much they affect the habitat of what I can see. I'll get to these guys at the end, right? But like the spongy moths. So this is from the Bashkill from 2 summers ago. There were some areas where, it's the middle of summer, you don't see any leaves because of all of the spongy moths and what they ate. So that's affecting the native caterpillars. All right, so here's an invasive caterpillar that's just eating all the green stuff. So all the things which should be here, they're obviously struggling. The same thing. Now, all of a sudden, we got all of these lanternflies. All right, well, what is that doing to the plants or the insects which were originally here as these invasive species spread? So new invasive insects are bad. And then, hey, welcome. And invasive plants are bad. Like here's a plant called Japanese knotweed. It's not supposed to be here. It's an invasive. So here's the shore of the Delaware. I love the shore of the Delaware because I expect to see cardinal flower, bright red flowers attracting the hummingbirds. Not anymore because this plant has just taken over. Look, that's all you see. It's not supposed to be here. There's supposed to be a gazillion other plants there. They're not. And the insects which are native to the area, they don't eat that. All right. They're used to the plants that should be there, but here's an invasive plant which has crowded it out. Same thing with loosestrife. All right. Blue's beautiful flower. I love the flower. But then you look at the field and you're like, that's not supposed to be here. It's changing the habitat, obviously, then changing the conditions for the insects. Then you have water chestnut, which is the one I hate the most. It's not supposed to be here. That's supposed to be open wall. There's supposed to be sunlight getting to algae, which then the water bugs eat, which then the fish eat, which then the herons eat. All right, that's the food chain that we want. And this invasive plant has just covered anything. There's no light getting down there anymore, changing the amount of oxygen in the water. So there is still habitat, but it's being dramatically changed by climate change. It's being dramatically changed by these invasive species. I did this 2 years ago. I didn't have time last year with my newsletter. I'd like to get back, where every month I would say, like, here are the flowers which are blooming. And then I would ask, how many are native? So I'm like, oh, here are all the ones. And I didn't know. I'd have to look it up. And I'm like, oh, out of this, Philadelphia fleabane out of this group was the only native flower. And then I just kept doing that, where you'd be like, oh, and you think like there's a couple invasive species, but only a couple. And then you're like, ooh, now out of that last one, only blue flag was native. So let me just go back to that. So here you're walking around like, oh, look at all these beautiful flowers. They don't belong here. Blue flag does. But there's so the number of plants in our area that were introduced just in the past century or two, it's half. All right, it's amazing once you start looking into it because you say, oh, I know the 3 invasive species here. And then you realize there's 20 invasive species here. And I started off with this insect just here. It's called the dogbane beetle. Why is it so bright and shiny? It wants predators to notice it because it's poisonous. It eats dogbane, which is a poison. Well, it has a lot of toxins. So it has its name because you don't want your dog to eat dogbane. It could get really sick and even die. So like the plant just puts toxic things in its leaves. This bug eats the plant. It has evolved the ability to metabolize the poisons so it can stand the plants. But now any predator that tries to eat this gets poisoned. So it's like, hey, remember me, shiny thing. Don't eat me. All right. But that took a long time to evolve. That this insect evolved, it's a native insect, evolved in association with the native plant so that it can metabolize the poisons of the plant and then have a role in an ecosystem. All right. So very specific relationship. And that's not all, because that's that beetle. But then we get into, obviously, so here's a milkweed tiger moth. Milkweed have all of these toxic things in them. So any one thing that eats milkweed has over time evolved the ability to metabolize those. So it's specific to the plant. Took a long time to develop this. Here's a red milkweed beetle. Same thing. All right, took a long time to adapt to that. And then obviously, monarch butterflies are coming soon. But all of these invasive plants, they've only been here 60 years. All right. So, these associations, it's not like going to like, a buffet of like a salad bar. All right. You can eat anything. Like if you're, oh, here's a salad bar. I can eat this. I can eat this. But plants are tricky. They poison their leaves. Like a bug can't just eat any plant. It can only eat the ones that it's adapted to eat. We'll be talking about those. So invasive species are a problem. Wait, unfortunately, there's more. There's a whole new set of insecticides. They are called neonicotinoid insecticides. We use a gazillion of them, and they're just prevalent everywhere. They're just so prevalent we don't talk about them because they're just assumed. Let's say you say, I'm going to go buy seeds. I'm going to go to a garden. All right, I want to have a pollinator garden. You might have just poisoned the pollinators because the seeds you bought were treated with insecticide. All right, it rains a little, so the insecticides dissolve in the water. The plant absorbs them. There are now insect-killing insecticides in the structure, all the tissues of the plant. All right. And so now anything that you didn't intend to kill, like, this insecticides were, you didn't want a blight of this problem insect or this problem insect, but now they're killing every insect. All right. And so we just see dramatic decreases in the pollinators, et cetera, because, so here you'll just see pollinators, all these little guys moving along. We have such a diversity of pollinators. It's not just bumblebees and honeybees, but they're dropping. And a lot of the ones people don't know very well, they are the ones which are really dropping the most, like the sweat bees. We have so many little bees, all right, that most people don't know about. And they are being decimated by all of these pesticides, which end up in the nectar and the plant material. And then you've got the artificial light. Most insects are nocturnal. Let me repeat that. Most insects are nocturnal, where they are primarily active at night. Now, I just want to talk about humans for a little bit. We have this light-dark cycle where we say, oh, it's light out, it's dark out. And as a result, we release melatonin, the hormone, which then causes changes in our physiology of things that happen at night that don't happen during the day. And it's important. If we get too much light, if we don't sleep at night, we can have disorders that things like melatonin can treat. So the amount of darkness is critical in our physiology. We have genes which regulate this. Well, guess what? The genes are old. Insects make melatonin. We did not invent that cycle. It goes way back to like wormy things. So insects use melatonin, so do we. We use certain genes called the period genes or clock genes to govern these rhythms. So do they. All right. So if light can disrupt our physiology, all right, well, it can do to theirs too. All right. So I'll come back to the moon in a second. Right. Somewhere, I swear. Where did I put it? It's in here somewhere. I just wanted to be scary with. All right, so if somewhere I have you flying over a city at night, and just the amount of light is insane. All right, and once again, this is a brand new thing. Where did I put that? Oh, there we go. Okay. So this is normal, all right? So, I mean, to us now, but bugs are expecting dark. That's bright light at those sources. So that triggers them to think it's day. So if they're not, and I'm sorry, I'm gonna try to mute anyone. I think there might be some background noise. Okay. So they have triggers. When do I reproduce? When do I feed? When do I do this, etc. And now it's so bright out at night that they're not responding the way they should. They're not feeding, and insect numbers are dropping, especially the ones which are coming out at night. Fireflies are being so affected because they'll stop signaling. They think it's daytime. Look at all of the light that's around. Even if they signal, they can't see their partners as well. It's too bright. They're adapted like it's night out. It's just pitch black, and all of a sudden you see this yellow thing flashing. The more ambient light we have, that's a problem. Plus, then you have the fact a lot of them are migrating. So what are they using? Well, obviously they're using the moon, they're using the stars. But now we have so many bright lights that A, they can't see that as well to use. And then they think that the street lights are the stars or the moon. They fly towards it. But then they die upon impact, or they just sit there and get disoriented and they get dehydrated. Or they go there and bats have figured this out. Toads have figured this out. Geckos have figured this out. So you got all these predators that hang out near the lights because the stupid bugs go there and get stuck. And so um, the insect apocalypse is not being caused by one thing, it's all of these things together. And we should watch because insects are pollinating, so many of the foods that we eat. Insects are the food for the birds and the fish, and they're cycling nutrients um, in wild habitats. And not to be really, egocentric about it, but if insect numbers are plummeting because of the pesticides which we have put into the environment without thinking about it, they're not the only ones who are being affected by it. The birds are because they eat the bugs, and we are. So, like, these are insecticides. They don't affect humans as badly as they affect um, bugs. But we do have the nicotinic acetylcholine receptors that these are acting on in bugs. We have them. They're a little different. They don't affect us as much. But we have them and we're ingesting them. You have these in your tissues. These are so prevalent in how we treat our crops, how we treat our seeds. You don't even think that when you buy seeds for your pollinator garden, you're bringing pesticides there as well. That's how prevalent these are. All right. But then we have these in our tissues. What are they doing? Well, we don't know. Like some of these we know affect mammals badly. Some of these have been banned. Welcome. Great to see you. Um, so I wanted to start off with the bad news first, because it just hit me that as we then go to the great diversity of insects, that now it's not only, hey, look at the diversity, look how beautiful they are, but also, wow, they're in trouble. All right. And so maybe that, helps us appreciate them um, a little bit more. Okay. So on that, I just want to just start zipping through the bugs. All right. Now, I'm going to start here, but this actually is the only one that would lead to an argument. If we have bug people in the room, are there bug people in the room or at home? No one said yes. So we could argue, are these true insects or are these just the sister group of, do we have a bug person there? I don't know. So that's a great question. I feel bad because I try to do a lot like with Audubon and a lot of things, and there's I just sometimes there's too much. I would love it if we did native plant cells. I would love to try to foster that. I haven't been able to do, maybe we do more. But then it would be great to find a nursery that does, like, we sell native plants, and I'm sure they would be the experts on the untreated seeds. That's a great question. I apologize. I don't know a good answer to that. And we should, and I think those organizations, and I'll get to Nancy in just a second, because she might know. Those organizations that I just said, as you look at different Audubon societies, I'm just picking them as an example. Like this one's really good at nature walks. This one's really good with native plant cells. This one's really good. So all of those resources at the beginning, if you contacted them, there might be some where that's their thing. They've got really good experts. Nancy is our resident expert on plants.
There are also,
And then I'm sorry, for people at home, I'll repeat what she says because I don't think they can hear you well.
there are companies now that do plant breeding, like Proven Winners is a big plant company. They do not treat their plants neonicotinoids.
Oh, okay.
So you can look into it and you can ask the local nurseries to bring in plants that aren't treated with neonicotinoids.
Okay. So thank you. Nancy, if you couldn't hear, said you can go to the nurseries and ask them to bring in plants which weren't treated by this. And then Jim and Lark were pointing out that there are places where you can go, like the Hudson Valley Seed Company, et cetera. So thank you so very much. Okay. Oh, but not safe in our ecoregions. So there are great resources. Thank you for all of those who contributed. If we're going to start with bugs, we could start with an argument. Are these insects? When I was studying, the answer was yes. Now I think most people are like, maybe not. Maybe they're just the cousins of insects. So these are called springtails. I love them because they'll come out on warm, snowy days, warm days in winter. And if you count the number, if you walk a trail, this could be the entire trail. You just walk, and every step you take, there are that many of them. You can come home and say, I have seen billions of living things today in winter. All right. So as far as the number, you saw like the number, the weight of organisms. So those are springtails. They are wingless insects. I like those a great deal. A lot of insects, like the ones that I'm about to go through, have aquatic larvae. All right. And so when we think of that's what the bug looks like, kind of like caterpillars. A lot of things that we think butterflies and moths, they're the be all end all. A lot of times that's just the very end of the life cycle. And maybe some moths, they only live a couple of days. That the caterpillar, that's the main lifespan of the insect. And the moths may not even have mouths. They might like just be slowly starving to death. That the idea was they come out of their chrysalis and their job is to mate, lay eggs, and die. All right, that's their job. That most of the life cycle was in the form of the larvae, and a lot of these larvae are aquatic. So here you can see little bloodworms. These grow up to be flies. I like them a lot. Here you see a really cool damselfly larvae in our area. Here, and of the insect groups, one of the more primitive ones that goes way back to the Paleozoic, which is old. So there were some of these things that are like 300 million years ago. Most of the insects we have today, they appeared with the dinosaurs. So the insects were around for like a couple 100 million years before there was a single bee, before there was a single ant, a beetle, a wasp, just so a lot of the insect groups which we know well, they're recent. But dragonflies, they go way, way back. Here you see males and females in flight. Here is the female taking sperm from the male. She'll fertilize her eggs. And then as they fly together, she tries to place them very specifically where they can develop, like maybe on an underwater stem. Maybe she'll make a little hole in the stem and put her eggs there. So there's a female doing that all on her own. But sometimes the male will kind of fly and support her while then she then dips her abdomen in here, in the water to place them specifically. And we have so many different kinds of it. That's like, before you know your sparrows among the bird people, they all look the same until you get to know some of the differences. And yesterday we were on a bird watch, and you're like, oh, white-crowned sparrows, and it was such the big deal. So sparrows are so cool once you get to know them. Well, there are now field guides for dragonflies, which are coming more and more popular because you realize we have such a great diversity in our area. Of course, there's no time to talk about that because we also then have a diversity of the damselflies, their cousins, including the largest of the damselfly, this ebony jewelwing. Beautiful, beautiful. And to reinforce a topic from earlier, they like streams. So you don't see them everywhere, just like birds. If you want to go birding, like this one lives in conifer forest, this one like fields, this one like this. Bugs are the same way. All right, it's not just bugs occur everywhere. They have specific habitats. So that first one, moving streams, they like, and you're only going to see them at a certain time of year, like in late spring, early summer, because once again, most of their life cycle is as larvae. They're only going to come out later. A lot of the mayflies, they live as adults for a day. All right, and that's, like if you're a fisher person who fly fishes, that's the thing. Once they come out, there's a gazillion of them. And so the fish, they're looking for that one because they're coming out like it for this couple days or this week or whatever. And so you want to have a fly that looks like that. So if a lot of some of the really good entomologists for insects are fly fishermen because they're like, ooh, I'm tying a fly to look like this one as opposed to next week, I'll get one that looks like this one. This is an aquatic larvae of a caddisfly that has made a little apartment for itself. So it just kind of took all this debris from the bottom, and it's just made a little house. And if you're a predator, you ignore that, not knowing that there's little bugs hiding inside that will then come out as flies. These guys you see in rivers. All right. So if you go to the Delaware and turn over a rock, these guys are super flat because like the Delaware River has a current. If I'm a big blob in a current, all of a sudden the current like blows me away. So these things are really flat so they can adhere to the rocks in the bottom in areas with a current, and then they will come out as as their stonefly larvae. And they often do, once again, like all of a sudden I'm kayaking, I'm like, oh, there's stoneflies all over the place. And like, this is their time. Then we have another group. Hey, welcome, welcome. These are stick insects. Obviously, you can see the reason for their name. That obviously a great form of camouflage to resemble twigs. Some of them resemble leaves, some of them resemble flowers. Okay. Then we have the mantises. I'm going through a bunch of the little groups quickly. There are some bigger groups like the beetles and the flies. I'll spend a little more time. Really intelligent insects. Holding their raptorial forelegs here so they can pierce on, grab on prey to capture. But they can fly with their wings. There was a chat. Let me just check. Chats. Okay. Oh, all right. All right. So Jazz, thank you for the suggestion. His suggestion was take up fly fishing. I'm a vegetarian now, so it would be less. But I did fly fish. But one of the times I went to practice, and I'll be honest, so just true story, and then I'm going to say I'm not going to do this anymore, is I actually went to a trout nursery, and like they sell like worms, and you catch like little trout. I'm like, no, I'm going to go fly fish. So here I am. There's just nothing but fish in these ponds, and me, I'm looking so cool flying. I caught nothing. So like, if you can't catch in a trout nursery, then I think that's a sign that you should give up your fly fishing. So sorry, Jazz, I tried it. Um, and there are invasive species as well. So there are two types of mantis in our area. The first one you saw is native. This one is invasive. Now, invasive doesn't always, sometimes you could use the term introduced. Sometimes like it's a problem if it starts to spread too much, but sometimes it's there, but not, exploding population. So as far as, there's some invasives that we worry a lot about. Other ones we know don't belong there, but don't really get excited. So I don't think this one is too worrisome. But once again, the balance in nature is being affected. So there are a number of insect species that we find in our area that this isn't their home originally. They're from other continents. Here, so that was oh, I'm sorry, that was the Carolina mantis. My apologies. That's the native one. Here's the Chinese mantis. This is the invasive one. Yeah. So actually, tell you what, yes, and we'll get to the hemipterans next. And so, yeah, so I think a lot of the hemipterans do. So like a little more like this maybe, as opposed to like this, but
Chinese the one they sell at the garden centers with they have the little egg pods.
I don't know. So you tell me if that's what you think.
They sell the.
Could be. Here are Dobson flies. Males have really long mandibles. Females, they're shorter. So that looks terrifying, but this is more for like mating than anything else. And fisher people love these because the larvae are aquatic, and these are really popular then to use, as lures for insects. So Dobson flies also then have um, aquatic larvae. There are different kinds of cicada. I know we associate cicadas with, they only come out in big, bunches. That is certainly true of the next group, but some of cicadas, they don't do that and they're here every year. And cicadas, I hate to be judgy, but apparently they're like just so much tastier than most bugs. They're just like if you're going to eat a bug, a lot of people say cicada, definitely go for the cicada. So everybody loves cicadas, and that'll be the motivation that some of them say, let's just come out every 13 years because everyone's going to eat us. But if we come out in such numbers, everything will have their fill, and there will still be enough of us to then reproduce and lay eggs. So these guys, they're coming out, but they've probably been underground for like 13 years or 17 years. Once again, a lot of what we think is the big phase of an insect's lifespan really isn't. All right, so they're just mating and laying eggs and trying to disperse themselves. It was the larval form living among the roots of plants that was the major group. So this is the one that comes out every so often. This was from along the Appalachian Trail near us. Oh, and I think, yeah, not that you have to, but like I think this one, like they're all over me along the Appalachian Trail. I think it like flies in my face at some point, which or somewhere it's flying in my face. Anyway, we got termites. All right. these are interesting because a number of insect groups have evolved social groups where instead of just like the individual being the norm, it's like, hey, let's work as a group to the point where maybe even let's sacrifice. And a lot of us are sterile, where we're not even trying to reproduce. Like we're just here, I serve this group, right? It's only the queen who is reproducing, or et cetera. So some may say, I'm just going to, work away all day. Others are thinking, I'll be the soldiers that defend the nest, et cetera. So some so that's an interesting other aspect to it. So that was a whole bunch of insect groups. I said we'd do hemipterans next. Hemipterans are all around us. Some of them are on land, so you can see hemipterans on land. So the small milkweed bug, once again, beautiful there. The colors it wants to be remembered because it tastes horrible. And it's trying to say, predators remember me. And I hate to say this, oh, so judgy. But like when I see red salamanders, the red Fs, like one thing jumps into my mind. Fish are stupid, right? That's what they're saying. Because they're only red when they're on land. Because land predators put them in their mouths, they're like, oh, this tastes so awful. I will never eat an orange thing again. I'll learn. But then when these salamanders become the adults, they become olive because fish don't learn like that. Fish aren't that smart. So there's no advantage to saying, look at me, I'm a dangerous, I'm full of toxins. Fish don't know. They'll just keep dying. And so they change their colors. So the same thing, you don't really see these bright colors in aquatic insects. All right. But here on land with the birds, I mean, I'll be brightly colored because the birds will learn. Don't ever eat me again. Here is a hemipteran called an ambush bug. And they often look like flowers. So they'll hang out in flowers, and then there'll be like little bees that come to pollinate. Some of them, like the things that hunt at flowers, can even have to go after hummingbirds at times. But they do have those raptorial legs as well. Hemipterans are sucking insects, all right? So the thing with plants is you need transport. So water has to go up, sugar often goes down. So just inside the bark or the outer epidermis of a plant, there's a tubes full of sugar. So a lot of insects like aphids and others are like, I'm just going to get a piercing mouth part, and I'm just going to then put it into that sugar tube, and I'm just going to suck sugar through the tube. And so that's why the spotted lanternfly is a problem. So I mentioned earlier the invasive plants. So we brought over an invasive plant called the tree of heaven. So I'm just being vain here. But we did a bird count 2 days ago. And someone had a guitar and they're like, well, come on, play the guitar. And so I started playing Stairway to Heaven. And so someone's like, oh, no, you don't do that one. I'm like I'm not. And so I do a song when I do this. There's a lady who's sad. Spotted lanternflies are bad, so she's cutting down the tree of heaven. They're like, oh, okay. So tree of heaven was a invasive tree. And one of the reasons we shouldn't bring in invasive plants is because now invasive bugs come with them. All right. So wherever this came from, there were bugs that adapted to that. Just like, the milkweed bugs are adapted to milkweed. There were bugs which were adapted to feeding on tree of heaven in Asia where it's native. And so if you bring in a new plant, all right, then it's not crazy that now you'll bring in all of the insects that they'll thrive here. All right, so they're going to be more highly concentrated on tree of heaven than any of our native plants. But then they can spread from this and go after the fruit trees and after all of the other things as well. But these are sucking bugs. Now, on that, a lot of the hemipterans are aquatic. So if you start fishing around for water bugs, giant water bugs these can actually go after baby ducks. I mean, they're big, right? There's lots of different ways that you can be an aquatic bug. One of the ways is you can breathe through your butt. All right. Dragonfly larvae do that. A lot of bugs actually do. So here you can see a breathing tube, which then allows this thing to just kind of hang upside down and like capture small fish because it's breathing through a tube coming out of the tip of its abdomen. Giant water bugs do that. Water scorpions do that. So I just did this video to show you how well camouflaged it is. So if you're a fish, you wouldn't see that there. But what it looks like is this. All right, once again, look at that long breathing tube. It can just kind of hang out of the water, breathe through that tube, and it's going to get fish as they go by. Some of these hemipterans are on the surface and they're grabbing little things there. So there's a water strider, all right? There is a creeping water bug. I'm going to say something about what I'm about to say is going to be true of them and the backswimmer. Backswimmers have a nickname called water bees. So these have piercing mouth parts, all right? So they can pierce plants. But if you're messing around with water bugs, which I do on occasion, I'm like, oh, let me show the kids, here's a water bug. All of a sudden, one of these will get me, and it hurts. Like it hurts worse than the bee sting. Once I was snorkeling the Bashikil through all this muck, and I came up, and one got me right on the lip, and it was just like it hurts a lot. So these things, if you're messing around with water bugs, just be careful because some of them, they're not coming after you, but they have piercing mouth parts, and if they feel threatened, they would certainly go after you. So the spotted lanternfly is a hemipteran which is invasive and bothers us. It's not the only one. There's the woolly adelgid, which really goes after the hemlock trees. Here you see the larvae and the pupal cases are of that they're making here to protect themselves, but this can just decimate hemlock trees if you see this white stuff on them. So that's one group of insects, and we refer to the groups of insects as orders. And so the ones I showed you earlier, that's a whole bunch of mixed orders. Because I'm not sure how much time I have, so I'd like to hit the big four. All right, so the big four, once again, over half of all species of life on Earth, including plants, fungi, bacteria, belong to four groups of insects. So if number of species is success, then these guys are certainly there. And getting back to my Paraguay story, and we just have estimates. Like, who's the expert on beetles in Brazil? Okay, or flies of Zaire, etc. Like here, we don't have good field guides for these groups in New York. All right, in Brazil and Indonesia, they don't exist, and the forests are disappearing, and so species that only have a narrow range, they disappear before we even know they were there. So hymenopterans are the group which includes the ants and then the bees and the wasps. Now, I think a lot of you, and they started off with a weird group. So before any of the groups they talked about, there were things called sawflies. And I think, yeah. So here you can see, oh, that was my sketch. Somewhere I've got better ones. There we go. So here's a sawfly. And you say, ooh, look at that stinger. No. So there's a story to be told. So I'm going to tell the story of this group. The story begins that that's an ovipositor. So the dragonflies, the females want to say, I want to put my egg here. So I'm going to make a little hole in this plant stem, put the egg here. That's what an ovipositor is for. Crickets have ovipositors. Lots of bugs do. You don't just put your eggs any old place. You say, I'm going to put it right there. So here's a sawfly. Same decision. I'm going to put an egg there. All right. So they're at the base of the family tree. All right. You go a little higher in, I'm sorry, that's the larger family tree. So we're going to get to wasps and all. And the earliest members of the wasp hymenopteran group, these include these sawflies. But if you go a little higher up, now all of a sudden, there's a strategy. The strategy is, this is, yeah, so I'm just showing, here's a cricket, there's the ovipositor. All right, so they're saying, female crickets saying, I'm only going to put my eggs in certain places. Here's a katydid, same thing. Males don't have that. All right, there's a dragonfly, like I said. But then it became a strategy. You know what would be cool? All right, because we all love the Alien movie. The cool thing is, how about you lay your egg inside someone else and your larvae just digest them from the inside? That's cool. And that gave us the wasps. Now, when I say wasps, wasps are one of the most abundant groups of life on Earth. There are wasps everywhere. And if you don't know that, it's because now they're super specific on this group of wasps only lay their eggs in the larvae of these beetles. These wasps only lay their eggs in spiders. These wasps, so they're really specific. So you probably have never heard of them. And if you see this wasp, you're like, oh, that's terrifying. I'd hate if that would sting me. No, that's they're not really stinging wasp. What it's going to do is it's going to go into a rotting log and stick its long abdomen and just kind of feel around and say, ooh, there's a beetle larva, egg inside the beetle larva. And now the young wasp is going to digest the beetle larva from the inside out. So the stinger, we haven't gotten to the stinger yet, is a modified ovipositor. Its original job was just like, let me be really selective about where I put my eggs. Okay, so here, this is a cicada killer wasp. Now, you don't want to be stung by these, but you would have to be messing with them to be stung by. Like, they're not going after you. I mean, like hornets, they go after me. That's how I broke my finger. It, like, kept coming at me. I'm like, get out of here. But it just, these are nice, but you don't want to mess with them. And it's laying its eggs in the cicada. So if you want a male wasp to develop, you need one cicada. If you want a female, which are bigger, you're probably going to need two or three. So what they do is this wasp is going to go out, find one of those cicadas that's out every year, lay its egg inside, and paralyze it so it's stunned, and then just the larvae are in a burrow, and so the larvae are slowly going to digest this stunned bug and eat it from the inside out. Wasps are among the most abundant insects. Once again, one of the four most specious groups. So there's a whole lot of this going on. We're most familiar with the social wasps, but that's only the top of the family tree, and that's not the majority. Most wasps are very specific. Like this one's living in this jungle, laying its eggs in this spider. This one's laying its doing this beetle larva, and you'll never hear of them. All right. But then the ones which hang out in groups, all right. So then the ovipositor becomes a stinger. And if you're social, you could say, hey, the queen's going to lay the eggs, and all you other females, you're not laying eggs. So don't use that to lay eggs. Just use that to protect the nest. So now it's a stinger, which is different from what it originally was. Most wasps aren't social, right? And then so these are the hornets, the wasps we know, and then the bees. So bees are modified wasps. In the family tree, wasps go way back. There are so many more wasps on Earth. And then bees are descended from those. And we have native bees like bumblebees and carpenter bees. And then all the little sweat bees that most people never, pay much attention to. A lot of them are very shiny. Right, but when we lose our pollinators to the pesticides, a lot of them are these little smaller pollinators which are being lost. So keep your lookout for them. They're really cute. They're really metallic and shiny. And there's a great diverse, like we have dozens of bee species in our area, and some of them are endangered. All right. So like that's what a lot of people are worried about. Like, there are like certain insects, including certain of these bees, haven't been seen since like the year 2000. All right. And so we don't really measure them. We don't count them in great backyard bird counts the way we do with birds, but we think we're losing them and we're concerned. Yeah.
I said, bees.
Hmm.
It put them in the for their beehives, which kind of goes against my grain because I like natives.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I'm certain I'm
native anyway. So
I'm with you. I'm 100% with you, but let me say why that might be done. Honeybees don't belong here, bumblebees do. Clover, red clover belongs here, white clover doesn't. And so if you're pollinating, the length of your mouth parts matter and like the strength. So it's not like any pollinator can pollinate any plant. Bumblebees very good at red clover, all right? Honeybees very good at white clover. And as humans then change the plants which are around, to your point, like I don't know, but like one pollinator, once you have so many invasive plants, the invasive bee might have a better time at it because the native plants are becoming less and less common. That's what the bumblebees were thriving on, or the sweat bees. So there's so much going on with these, and obviously people who study insects, a lot of them specialize. I'm a bee person, you're a hemipteran person, you're a moth person. There's just too much. Like I feel that I don't know these, but no one could be expected to, when you have a million different species of insects. But thank you for that. So we have all of these. From the bees from the wasps evolved the bees, and then another group, which we call ants. So the first ants in the fossil record still had their stingers. All right. Ants are flightless wasps. And there are actually other flightless wasps, which people call velvet ants. They're technically not ants. They're true wasps that just don't have wings. But you can't tell the difference. The body shape is a lot like a wasp. If you put wings on that, especially if it still had its a stinger, you would think that it was a wasp. So ants are fairly new to the earth. Only later in by the end of the age of dinosaurs did wasps develop into ants. Once again, they still had stingers, but at first, but then they just lost that. This is Costa Rica, and these are army ants, and so ants just have an incredible biomass and play all of these roles in the an ecosystem. So taking all of the insects that they would find in their route, including all the plants, etc. And we could say more about ants, but once again, there's no time because not to go in a slightly religious vein, but I think I like the reference. There was an early evolutionist who studied beetles, and someone wanted to get in a theological discussion and asked him, like, what has your lifelong study of beetles told you about God? And the biologist replied, he was awfully fond of beetles. Because as of right now, there are more species of beetle known than any other group of organisms. Flies may overtake them, the better we study flies. But if you ask what order of living things outnumbers everything else, it's the beetles. So there are more beetles than everything else. Beetles are kind of like butterflies in that they have the different stages of their life cycle. And just like the caterpillar doesn't look like much like the adult butterfly or moth. Same thing for beetle larvae. So if you're in the ground, right, in the soil, that's where the beetle larvae are. There's just so many beetles there, and we have such a diversity. I've already mentioned some shiny ones, all right here. So there's the milkweed beetles, but here's the splendid boring beetle, nice and shiny. At flowers, you can see the long-haired beetles. We know about dung beetles. I'm sorry, we know about ladybugs. Dung beetles are ancient. These were like messing around in the feces of sauropod dinosaurs back in the Jurassic period. The dinosaurs are gone, but they just said, oh, we can do that to elephants and other, big animals. So they stuck to this life cycle for hundreds of millions of years. And obviously are therefore important in recycling nutrients, like this carrion beetle. We want nutrients to be recycled. We don't want carcasses to stay. And insects are good at that. A lot of beetles are aquatic, like these whirligigs that actually have two pairs of eyes. One pair of eyes is looking for the fish that they're trying to eat, and then one pair of eyes is looking to see if there are any predators above. So they just sit on the surface of the water looking at both simultaneously. So you often see them skating here. And these are actually whirligigs from underwater. So my camera's underwater looking at the whirligig swirling around on the top. So we got all of these beetles, once again, the most diverse group. Okay. And I'd love to tell you more about them, but there is no time, all right? Because we got flies, all right? Once again, one of the big four groups of organisms. Once again, flies have this larval stage. So just like the butterflies that have the 4 stages, so too do flies. They go from eggs into larvae, which people who aren't like us, they would call maggots. We obviously would refer to them as larvae and not maggots. Some of them live in the water, as that one would. Then some of them live on land, so the eggs can be laid in rotting material here. And flies break into groups. So like, some have more longer antennae, and some the antennae are like feathery. Look how feathery those antennae are. So there's all these different kinds of flies. One of the things that makes flies super special is that most insects have 2 pairs of wings. Somewhere I have it. Oh, hold here. Where flies took their second set of wings and they made it a balancing structure. So while most insects, 2 pairs of wings, that's the hind wings of flies. It's used for balance. So they really only have 1 flying wings. So that's a unique thing that really defines this order. All right. So fruit flies have taught us so much about our own genetics. We've learned so many human genes by studying fruit flies first. So here are fruit flies. They form, so the adults lay an egg, which hatches into this moving larva, which then forms a pupal case. That was what was on the side, which then becomes the adult. We have so many cool flies. Here's a big one called the Midas fly that lives in our area. They're kind of cool. One of the cool things are the hover flies, because a lot of you, I'll bet you don't I bet you think that's a bee. That's not a bee, that's a fly. Once again, bees would have two pairs of wings. That's a fly, it only has one. It looks like a bee because things avoid bees, because bees can sting. So these flies have evolved a mimicry. They're like, oh, if I look like a bee, everyone stays away from me. And so you'll see them in flowers a lot. They're very important pollinators. So hoverflies are good. In fact, a lot of flies do pollination. However, if I certainly have done this on occasion, where like you smell a flower and you're like, huh, interesting smell in this flower. Like, I'm not sure I like approve of this. And there was, oh, this is for a fly. They go after things that smell like sweat. Some of them, there are flowers like pitcher plants are a little like this. Like if you look at the flower, it's like maroon. It's like, kind of like rotting, flesh colored, smells a little stinky. It's not trying to attract a bee that likes the nice, like flowery, perfumey type of thing. It wants a fly. So, flowers have specific shapes and colors to attract specific pollinators. A lot of flowers are fly pollinated. And when you smell them, they smell off. And it's like, oh, they're not shooting for the bees, they're shooting for the flies. Okay. Um, so two jokes, and then we move on to our last group. So if you were to go to Lake Wallenpaupack in like a month and a half, there's this. Once again, there's like insects that are waiting for a certain time of the year. We're gonna come out in mass groups. We're gonna mate. We're gonna lay our eggs, and then we'll die. And that's what the seagulls were eating. But just they're everywhere. All right. So that's here. But if you go to Meatvan, Iceland, Meatvan actually means Midge. I think it's like Midge Island in Iceland. So here we are. So the town is named for midges. And if you say, why would you name your town for midges? And the answer is because they are everywhere and they don't bite. All right. But they are everywhere. And just once again, like there are just millions and millions of living things there. All right. So when we talk about like life in an area and its important role, yeah. So really incredible the images of meat fun. But we don't have time because we have to get to our last group, the butterflies and moths. So lepidopterans are named for the scales on their wings. That's what they're named as scaly wings. And if you take a butterfly wing under the microscope, sorry, and you see, oh, look, yeah, the scales, like a lot of things are just transparent or translucent. No, these are the scales. That's what makes it like a little fluffier. So that's what defines the group so much. Actually very pretty. So, anyone is welcome if you ever wanted to, we got microscopes, we got butterfly wings. If you ever wanted to look at them under a microscope, that is what they would look like. Butterflies have a proboscis, we know that, but the first ones didn't. They just had regular insect mouth parts. So here's the proboscis, that coiled mouth part that we associate. But that came a little bit later. The first moths, they had mouth parts that look like this. Now, I know you want to talk about butterflies, but that is an injustice. Most of them are moths, right? Butterflies are modified moths that come out in the day. So if you look at the moth family tree, moths start down here, all right? They don't have a proboscis at first, then they got a proboscis or all these different kinds of moths. And then it's only up here that butterflies come around. So butterflies are like the last big group of moths, and they come much, much later, like right at the end of dinosaurs. So there were moths for millions and millions of years before butterflies ever existed. But they're nocturnal. Most insects are. And so we're not as familiar with the moths. All right. So we have moths in our area. All right. They tend to have different antennae than the butterflies do, because if they're coming out at night, they're using chemicals to talk. So males and females are making pheromones that they can pick up from miles away. So a male moth can pick up, there's a female moth 2 miles away because it's picking up chemicals in the wing with these antennae. Notice the butterflies. They have more club antennae. They are not doing that. All right, so there's a butterfly with its club antennae, unlike the greatly increased surface area so that you can pick up those odorants in the air with the moths. Obviously, moths would be greatly affected by artificial light at night because so many of them are nocturnal. A lot of flowers are white and only bloom at night. They're not looking for bees to pollinate them. They're looking for moths. A lot of moths don't have mouths. The larvae, the caterpillars fed, and once they become moths, they're just going to mate and die. That's their only job. So they don't even bother trying to feed. because moths are the most common, most caterpillars you've ever seen turn into moths, right? Butterflies, they're the minority in the group. So when you say, oh, what butterfly does that become? It doesn't. That makes a moth. This one makes a moth, etc. And then obviously then there's some which became more diurnal, coming out more in the day. They modified their antennae. And then we have different groups of those. They went through like a family tree. One of the groups, this is odd, but one of the things that marks the Ditrichians is they decided among females, you know what would be interesting? Let's, instead of having one female opening for mating and for then egg laying later, let's make two. So they have two separate openings, one's for mating, one's for laying eggs. That's a unique thing to them. And they were like, oh, you're the higher butterflies, because the original butterflies, they were more typical with insects, whereas the Ditrichians, they developed that second opening. Okay. So, we didn't go through all of them. Like, we didn't go through the grasshoppers. There's certainly a lot of those. But obviously, if this is most of life on Earth and most of its diversity, we can't. So the goal for tonight's talk was to start with, as you know, someone who, a lot of the people watching this, you're in Audubon societies, and that's one of the reasons, we do this. We were just counting birds. Like, this whole weekend was called the Great Backyard Bird Count. So to do this, I was today entering on eBird. Here's all the things I did. Like, birders do that. No one does that for the frogs. No one's doing that for the fish as much. And certainly no one's doing it for the bugs. And the problem is their numbers are declining even faster than the birds. So something serious is happening. Once again, whether you call it the second silent spring or the insect apocalypse, right? Just some combination of the habitat that they're losing, the climate change of the existing habitat, the invasive species which are coming in and changing the habitat, the pesticides which are far more prevalent than we realize because they're just in all of the seeds. The artificial light at night, given that most insects are more active at night than during the day, that's messing them up. Some combination is causing their numbers to plummet. And even if I'm like more of a bird lover, the birds I want to see in spring, half of them are eating the insects. And if the insect numbers plummet, obviously this is affecting the birds as well. The second half, I just wanted to we split our insects into these different orders. And I've said this before, I hate to be so negative. Like, I've traveled a bit and I get to certain places where I love it, it's beautiful, but it's a little boring. Where like out west, there's just not the diversity here. You come home and you realize we have so much. The bird diversity, the insect diversity here is just so far much more than you would see in so many different places on Earth. So A, it's just wonderful that we can enjoy that. But B, we are now the guardians of this great biodiversity, which is in really trouble, a lot of trouble right now. So the points earlier about the native plants and the ones which don't use the pesticides, if you can plant native plants in your garden, you're helping. All right, it's not just trendy, and it's not just looks nice. Like, our native animals, they're in trouble, and by just what you plant in your backyard, you're having a role in helping to preserve them. All right, so thank you for coming. Obviously, you're interested, so you're the people. If they're going to be helped, it's by people like you. So I thank you for that. Great to have you. Next week we start focusing more on the water, where we'll look at like water bugs, etc. But then we'll get into fish, maybe throw in some coral reefs by the end. And then by then, I know you look outside, it doesn't feel like spring, but it's this close. The bald eagles, they can at any moment start coming back and fixing up their nest to lay their eggs. There are a lot of ducks that come by the end of February, like the pintails and the ringneck ducks. If it's a little warmer, we'll be getting them even before March hits. The blackbirds are coming back. So, a couple more talks, and already we have to start talking about spring amphibians and spring ducks, etc. So we're almost there. Thank you so very much for coming. We'll see you next week. And if anyone has any questions, I see there's a couple things on online. All right. Oh yeah, it's sweet. The sweat bees, they're great. Yeah, I agree. I agree. Oh, you had a butterfly in your room a couple days ago. That's interesting. Okay. Oh, an area of BioBlisses. BioBlisses are great. Yeah. Thank you for all your comments online. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.